Sean Durkin's The Iron Claw picks up right where the acclaimed filmmaker's first two films left off. 2011's Martha Marcy May Marlene and 2020's The Nest both received critical praise, as did the staggering performances of Elizabeth Olsen and Carrie Coon, respectively. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that Zac Efron is now receiving the best reviews of his career in Durkin's latest well-received drama about the tragic true story of the Von Erich wrestling family. The A24 film centers on Efron's Kevin Von Erich, as he's the sole survivor of a real-life nuclear family that once included 5 other sons: Jack Jr., David, Harris Dickinson, Carrie, Jeremy Allen White, Mike, Stanley Simons, and Chris. In a tough decision, Durkin cut the youngest brother, Chris, from the proceeding, since there's only so much trauma an audience can handle in one 2-hour-plus sitting. However, each brother was raised by their father Fritz Von Erich, Holt McCallany, in a pressure cooker environment, where they were not only held to impossibly high standards, but were also subjected to Fritz's ever-evolving rankings of his favorite son. Fritz taught his sons to withhold emotion no matter whom or what they lost in the process, and so Durkin purposefully saved the film's concluding emotional scene for the final day of principal photography. The end of a production rarely coincides with the end of the story it's telling, so Efron and his character finally got to experience the catharsis that was denied throughout the story and shoot. It was all leading up to that for Zac, because there were so many moments in the film where his character just wants to cry. His character just wants to break, and I just kept saying to him, "No, not now, not here," Durkin tells The Hollywood Reporter. And so he was keeping it all in, and when we finally got to that final day, he was just full of tears. We did 7 takes of that shot with the boys. He just kept going, and it was really amazing. Durkin shot the film's wrestling scenes in such a visceral manner that the audience can feel each moment of impact and the ensuing pain that comes with it. As a wrestling fan himself, the Canadian-American filmmaker partially wanted to make a point to anyone who demeans the work of professional wrestlers. On some level, I must be, because, as a wrestling fan, I feel so defensive about that argument, Durkin says. I feel outraged when people dismiss wrestling, because every form of entertainment that we consume is scripted. So what's the difference? Below, during a recent conversation with THR, Durkin also compares the toxic patriarchal figures that appear in all his films so far, before detailing why he omitted Chris Von Erich from Iron Claw. Well, let's cut to the chase. Do you believe that this family was actually cursed? I do not believe in curses, at least not in the mythical sense. I do believe in the psychology of a curse, and when you're in a family where a lot of bad things have happened and happened to you, it's very easy to believe that you are going to get sucked into that pattern. And sometimes, that can almost become self-fulfilling, but that psychology certainly can take a toll and almost act as much as the idea of a mythical course could act. So, no, I don't believe in it, but yes, I think the results of it can be the same. We've seen sports dads drive their kids to breaking points. For example, Todd Marinovich, the famous test tube QB, had his diet controlled as far back as the womb, and he eventually had a lot of problems. So I think the Von Erich family is just the most extensive version of that, since 5 wrestling brothers were all raised in a pressure cooker. Yeah, I think so. Fritz is a really interesting story because he was going to play in the NFL and then hurt his knee. Kevin was potentially on his way to the NFL, but hurt his knee. Carrie was on his way to the Olympics, but the boycott happened. So there were these alternate athletic paths for them, but ultimately, the family business was the thing to fall back on. Fritz fell into wrestling and then claimed he never wanted his boys to be wrestlers, but he obviously wanted them to be wrestlers. And so there's a contradiction there. But I do think that Fritz operated from a place of love, as hard as he was and as damaging as some of his decisions were. I think he loved his boys and thought he was giving them the best life and setting them up for the best life they could have. Obviously, he had some blind spots there, to say the least, but I think his intention was for them. John Hawkes' character in Martha Marcy May Marlene, Jude Law's character in The Nest, and Holt McCallany's character in Iron Claw all seem like chips off the same block. They're patriarchs who hold their respective families hostage with their dreams and delusions. Am I onto something here? You're definitely onto something. A cult leader, Hawkes' character, is typically manipulating and harming people, consciously, for gain. The characters of Fritz, McCallany, and Rory, Law, are certainly gaining from making decisions for their family, but they don't mean to harm. So I would say that's the difference, but they're still very much, like you say, patriarchs making selfish decisions that cause harm, whether intentional or not.